What's going on, world? It's your boy at Big Game James _36, and I'm here with Greg McGarity, and this is the Tax Layer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection presented by Toyota, where each and every week we go over the current landscape of college football and how it relates to the Tax Layer Gator Bowl played here January 2nd in Jacksonville, Florida, where we pick a great team from the SEC and a great team from the ACC. College football is fastly coming to an end. It felt like it took forever to get here. And we felt like it was going to take forever to be played. But, man, you blink your eyes, and all of a sudden the season's coming to an end. And now everything's starting to shape up with the college football playoff selection that happens every Tuesday. This kind of gives us an idea of where things are going to be and what the landscape is going to be. I am looking at this, and I think it's going to be a lot of interesting things that keep playing as this rolls out. Obviously, there's 5 teams that have to be in. The Power 4 and the highest ranked group of 5. If Notre Dame wins out, they're going to be guaranteed a slot. So that's 6 right there. Right. Now, this past weekend made things a little bit interesting because of teams that lost and teams that won. And if I had to predict, I think that whole thing that the SEC and the Big Ten were trying to position is going to work out for them anyway, because I think they're going to get those remaining 6 slots left. I think there's going to be 3 SEC and 3 Big Ten teams.
I think so too, because you're not seeing any other Big Ten teams develop or Big 12 teams really challenge. So what's left? And that's the SEC and the Big Ten. So it'll be interesting to see how those are going to be placed. Not as much in the Big Ten. You pretty much know who those 4 teams are going to be. If Indiana continues to play well, the SEC, who knows? Georgia was seeded number 2 last week, and they fell all the way to 12 after 1 week after losing to another ranked team. So it might not make sense to some people, but it's the system we have now, and so you just got to win, baby. Just got to win.
Even with that, that's actually very interesting. We were talking off camera about Texas a little bit. Texas has no wins over ranked opponents, and their only loss is to a ranked opponent, and it was a convincing loss. But when you look at Georgia, 2 losses, 2 ranked opponents, numerous wins over ranked opponents. How do you balance that out? I mean, I know it's the luck of the draw with the schedule. Everybody knew Georgia's schedule was going to be pretty tough, but how do you what is your opinion on that, or is it just kind of like sometimes you just gotta take it how it goes?
Well, I think there are 2 things at play. One, I know that the committee in the very beginning talked about the strength of schedule would really, really weigh heavily. I'm not so sure that came into play after the second release of the college football playoff rankings. As you mentioned, it's hard to compare schedules, but when you see certain teams playing top-ranked teams and winning or losing, that should have a little bit more weight than those that kind of go through the season undefeated or maybe 1 loss. But it's the system we have now. I do think that Texas A&M, if they keep on winning, the loser of that game is going to fall into our bowl pool. I think the winner advances. I just don't know if Texas could have 2 losses and no really impressive wins unless they beat Texas A&M.
Well, I also think the benefit of the SEC is if Texas is in that team, there's still enough of those teams that are in that 2-loss category, 1-loss category that could jump them. Which brings us to what we talk about. Obviously, the Tax Layer Gator Bowl, we pick a team from the SEC and a team from the ACC every year to be able to play here in Jacksonville, Florida, at TIAA Bank Field. The next few weeks for the SEC is going to feel like basically a playoff within the playoff, a playoff for the playoffs, as you just described. And that leaves us with, we'll go over our pool of available teams that are very, very good, that will all be beneficial, that we would like to see here in a bowl game. This week coming up, we have another ranked UT team playing Georgia. What are your thoughts on that game? What are the implications? What does it mean if Georgia loses, and what does it mean if Tennessee loses?
Well, I think again, strength of schedule would come into play. I don't know if there'll be a 3-loss team in the playoffs, because you'll have some obviously with 2 and maybe a few with 1. Just depends on what the committee decides. I do think if Tennessee loses, it knocks them out.
Okay.
Because of their lack of a strength of schedule. Their win against Alabama was impressive, but beyond that, there's not much there. And losing to Arkansas on the road, which is, fighting for its bowl eligibility there. But I think I know A&M and Texas don't play for a while, but I think the loser of that game falls into our pool. And then, heck, you've got teams Missouri, LSU, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Arkansas. So there's going to be enough depth. But to your point, I think maybe SEC teams have a chance to slide into the playoff more so than the Big Ten once you get past the first 3 or 4 teams.
You just brought up Arkansas fighting for bowl eligibility. Texas still fighting to be able to consider playing the SEC championship for the opportunity to play in the college football playoff. Texas and Arkansas, high stakes. Sarkisian's first year, again, another one of those games where people are talking about a team that if they win out is also in things shaped out. LSU could actually be in the SEC championship. Yeah. LSU UF, that's a rivalry, correct?
It is of late. I think you've seen some games that have they're always highly competitive. And how will LSU rebound after getting thrashed by Alabama? And how will Florida, is what's their quarterback situation like? Is Lagway back in play, which kind of changes the dynamics altogether? But Florida's got to be sure they play great defense, which they didn't do against Texas, because defense can keep you in a game. Mm-hmm. But if you're not playing really strong defense, you really have no chance.
And then you have Missouri, South Carolina as well listed. Yeah. And again, Missouri still trying to one of the more potent offenses, just haven't probably played up to what the expectations were. South Carolina has actually played a lot better than what people thought they would do. So what are your thoughts on that game?
Well, I think it'd be very difficult for Missouri to work their way up. I think even they're still winning, but I think they're stuck in the 20s. So I'm not so sure that's going to there'll be a potential play in the college football playoff. But Brady Cook, if he's playing, it changes the whole dynamic. I'm not so sure he's playing, but even if he were playing, I think South Carolina, it's an afternoon game. I think South Carolina is just really playing well now, and they've caught some fire, and they've got a chance to win 9 games this year, which you probably would not have thought that at the beginning of the year. But they closed with Clemson at Clemson, but there's a good chance that they would win their next 2 games and then set up that battle royal in Clemson.
Going into the ACC, something happened last week that people could say would happen, but you couldn't predict it based upon predict it totally accurate based upon the way that the University of Miami has been playing, one of the most explosive offenses. They went to Atlanta, played Georgia Tech, got upset by Haynes King and company. Very, very tough game. I really thought Cam Ward was going to work his magic late. They had the ball opportunity. He turns it over. But that throws a little wrinkle. Miami still considered favorites to go to Charlotte. But right now, they got to finish the drill. But that makes the Clemson-Pittsburgh game a little bit more interesting because the winner. Well, Pittsburgh's only got 1 loss. No, they have 2 losses. Excuse me. But Clemson still has the opportunity to be able to keep that hope alive for that ACC championship. Now, does Miami have a tiebreaker over them or SMU, or how does that work?
I'm not sure if they play each other from that grouping there, but I think SMU is probably in the lead because their strength of schedule is very weak coming down the road here. So I think you've got a collision course there, maybe with Miami, as long as they keep winning against SMU in the ACC championship, which would leave Clemson right there on the doorstep. But Clemson's got some tough games to play. But the ACC is on the cusp of maybe just having their champion in the game if it's SMU, because I'm not so sure Miami could sustain a loss to SMU and a loss to Georgia Tech and still be in the top 12.
Yeah, definitely nightmare scenario for the ACC. If Miami would have been undefeated going into the ACC championship and got upset or defeated, they would still be in the college football playoff.
Correct.
Right now, if there will not be, as it stands now, there will not be a 2-loss team in the ACC championship unless it happens, in the playoff, unless it happens to be the ACC champion. Other games that are played, Notre Dame should win the rest of their schedule, which would take them out of Gator Bowl consideration into college football consideration. SMU playing on Boston College, where they're going through some changes of personnel. Guys entering the transfer portal, guys deciding that they're not going to going to play. But are there any other interesting games on the docket that you would like to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, Clemson Pitt's a big game. Clemson more than likely will be in our pool, but they cannot return to the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl this year. So even if they were in our premium pool, they could not play here. But I think, if SMU goes to the championship game and loses, they'd be in our pool. You've got Duke, you've got Syracuse, Louisville, and I think North Carolina's got a chance to run the table to get 8 wins. So, teams with 10, 9, and maybe 8 wins are going to be in our pool from the ACC. So, there got to be a minimum of 4 teams in the premium pool. So it could expand, but I think you're starting to see some clarity there as we get towards the end of the season.
And on the SEC side, we talked about it a little bit. Obviously, this game with Georgia and Tennessee is a eliminator game. The loser of that will be in this pool. And then later on down the road, if they both continue to win, the loser of the Texas A&M game would be in our pool as well, along with Missouri, LSU, South Carolina, or Arkansas. South Carolina would actually be can South Carolina play in it? But weren't they here not too long ago?
2 years ago, and there's nothing within the SEC agreement that precludes them from playing. It's not desirable, but it could happen. You've seen some teams go back to back. That's not desirable, but certainly with some time in between. Probably a lot of those kids on South Carolina's team were not even at USC when they were here playing Notre Dame.
And going to the thing that we'll know a lot more clarity and will shape a lot of these things up. But the college football brackets right now, not the rankings.
Right.
The rankings mean something, but the brackets are different. In the first 4 brackets, the top 4 teams are all conference champions. Right now, they have predicted Oregon being 1, Texas being 2, Miami being 4, BYU being 3. Honestly, if I'm Miami, I think I'm in a – well, no, I guess it's shifted now. But before it was that Alabama, Georgia, or something like that. I wouldn't want that one.
Yeah.
I lose. Losing, you win by losing in that one. But the other teams that wrap it up, I guess Tennessee would host Notre Dame.
Correct.
Indiana would host Alabama. Penn State would host Ole Miss. Ohio State would host Boise State.
Right.
The fun part about this is a lot of people when Florida State issued that they wanted to leave the ACC. A lot of fans were hinting that the Big Ten. I don't want to be in the Big Ten because we're going to have to play in snow. And I told people, it's like, well, you don't have to play in snow unless you get into that December time frame. It might be some snow games here. Like Ole Miss may see snow. Alabama definitely might see snow in Indiana. The warmest game will probably be Tennessee, and that's still up that way. So, but if they flip that if they had to go to Notre Dame, it would be really interesting. But what are your thoughts on that playoff bracket right there?
Well, I think it's obviously you want to be in the bracket where the 4th seeded team is. Kind of Ohio State, just play it out. If they won, they'd play Miami. If they won, they'd have a rematch with Oregon. Indiana's really kind of a wild card there. I guess the committee feels like that Alabama would lose to Indiana at this point in time. So I'm not so sure how that would play out. Texas is a 2, BYU is a 3. If you're Penn State, you're loving that because it kind of gives you maybe a run to the semifinals against Texas, Alabama, or Indiana. And again, we really don't know how good Texas is. Obviously, the committee feels really strong about passing the eye test, but again, strength of schedule and what they have left is really not that difficult, other than A&M.
And but the biggest thing again is watching the way the season closes. There's a team that a lot of people including myself, gave a lot of heck to last year in Colorado. Yeah. That if they win out, they get a chance to play that BYU team. And now they do have one common opponent in Kansas State. BYU whooped Kansas State. Kansas State beat Colorado. But it could be an interesting matchup. And then what we would like to see, what would the committee do if BYU's loss was in the Big 12 championship and to Colorado, and that would give them – Deion would go from not making a bowl game to the playoffs in year 2 and be the talk of college football.
No doubt.
Which is what makes, no matter what people say, no matter what you feel about NIL, no matter what you feel about the transfer portal, no matter what you feel about all of these different things, this is what makes college football cool. The storylines and who was good last year could be bad this year, and who was bad last year could be good. That's why people watch it. That's why it's continuing. The game is continuing to grow. As also what we need to continue to grow is people coming into the Gator Bowl. Make sure you consider becoming the Chairman's Club. Hit us up for all those kind of different, for that kind of information. Outside of that, each and every week, Big Game James _36 and Greg McGarity will come to you and talk about the landscape of college football as it relates to the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl played here January 2nd in Jacksonville, Florida. This is the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl Drive the Selection Show presented by Toyota. We will see you guys next time.